Boston about 2 days ago, traveling during a pandemic. It was interesting. Definitely one of the most scary things I think I've ever done. But it was definitely not as bad as I expected. It's very different, but not too bad. So actually last year I traveled on the same days as this year. I traveled the day after Christmas to Boston, and I did the same this year, unexpectedly. Didn't expect to be traveling this year because of COVID and lockdown and everything. It seemed a bit crazy to try and travel, but it actually all worked out, which was really cool. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here. And I'm in quarantine for 5 days now. So I flew with Qatar Airways just because they had the best, well, they're one of the best safety rated and one of the best crew safety rated, but they also have had the best layovers. So air travel is actually not as high risk as I expected. I wasn't that keen to travel at first just because it seems a bit crazy to have to, I guess, be on that extra little bit of alert that I feel like I've been on for months, of just being a little more careful about who you're around, who you're interacting with, what you touch, sanitizing your hands all the time, keeping your mask on, all of these things that you have to think about, which is a lot more than usual when you just want to go hang out with someone or anything. So it seemed a bit crazy to try and travel right now, but we did a lot of research into how safe it is. And actually flying is not that high risk with this virus because of the HEPA filters, because the air is circulated so fast, and especially when people are wearing masks. And there's quite a lot of research into this, where you can also just see how many people have been infected whilst flying is actually pretty low. There's obviously things you're supposed to be very careful of and aware of, and especially like boarding and disembarking. Obviously then you're right next to people potentially, you're moving past people, there's also people moving. I didn't have any domestic flights in Boston. I obviously in the US, to Boston. I did have a domestic flight in South Africa that couldn't really be avoided. I wore N95 masks the whole time, and obviously those are better rated for dealing with viruses, so that was pretty cool. But I had to change them every 2 to 4 hours, so yeah, try to change them pretty often. Kept them on all the time other than for eating or drinking water. Everyone was actually really good. I was quite impressed by how people actually followed the rules and the guidelines and the precautions and everything you're meant to do. On all of my flights, everyone that I saw was pretty good at keeping their masks on. Sometimes people put them like below their noses, but usually the air hostesses would come around and be like, can you put your mask on? Can you put your face shield on? We had to wear face shields. That was not super fun, but it was not too terrible. Flying with Qatar, you have to wear a face mask and a face shield, other than for eating and drinking, obviously, because it's long flights, you can't really not eat and drink. But that was not too bad because I just tried to eat at a different time to those around me. Everyone I saw slept with them on, which kind of sucks, but the one thing that sucked was wearing a mask plus the face shield, and then the face shield starts like fogging up sometimes. Not all the time, but just sometimes, especially after I slept. I think I like got it dirty by like getting it touching my face or something. Then I tried to clean it and that didn't really work. So getting off the flight in Doha, because I flew through Qatar, and we had to get on buses to get into a terminal. That sucked because this whole area was like not clean and I couldn't see properly, and that was not pleasant. But then as soon as we got into the terminal building, they asked us to take the face shields off anyway. And then yeah, going through boarding was quick. The other thing that kind of sucks about traveling at the moment is the water fountains aren't generally accessible, which kind of sucks because I ended up buying so many bottles of water whilst traveling, because obviously you go through security and you can't have water. And then it was really hot in South Africa and in Doha, but then I bought water in Johannesburg and in Doha. Both times I only got a drink. Actually, no, the first time I got a ticket on the plane because I was through security. But in Doha, we had to go through, because I'm coming into the States, and we had to go through another security right at the gate. And then you're not allowed to take water through, even though I bought it right across the terminal at the shop right there. But I'm not allowed to take it through. But anyways, it's fine. The other problem that we did run into, which was not that big of a deal, is I got to Johannesburg and I went to check in. Qatar is actually pretty busy at the moment, so check-in was quite long. Then I got to the front of the baggage drop-off counter, and the guy was so nice, but he was asking where I was going, looked at my passport, obviously checked my visa. He then said I needed a letter of invitation because I'm traveling to the States and need a letter of invitation, which we didn't see anywhere. We've obviously been checking all the regulations, both on Qatar and like their website, and just in general for Massachusetts and the US, but there was nothing there. So obviously coming to Massachusetts, you can either have a PCR test 72 hours before you arrive, or you need to go into quarantine. We were aware of that, and I did get a PCR test before I left South Africa, but it wasn't quite valid by the time I arrived. So also because of like Christmas in between, it was hard to get like the timing right, which is fine. I knew I was going to quarantine for 5 days anyway before I got another PCR test, just to make sure I'm okay. But we didn't know we needed this letter of invitation, so that was a little bit annoying because now I had to quickly sort it out, but that wasn't that big of a deal. Then you go through the security to the international terminal. In the international side in Johannesburg, almost all the shops are closed. I didn't know that though. But you can't buy food. I did manage to buy some water. There was just like a little kiosk near my boarding gate where you could just buy some little snacks and water and stuff. But most of the shops were closed, most of the restaurants were closed, just to be aware of that. But then going through security, you also needed like another form to fill in, which there's this line, so I joined the line, seeing that there are these 2 tables before you go through the actual security. And then they were like, do you have this form? So I'm like, no, I don't have this form. So then I had to leave the line to go fill in the form, to go back to the line. Basically just saying like where I was going, where I was coming from, some contact information, like where I was when I was in South Africa. Yeah, pretty normal stuff, I guess. Not usually, but during COVID, I think it's pretty normal. The flight to Qatar was quite, not that full, but fairly full. And then the one from Doha to Boston was really nice, because that was the longer flight. But almost everybody, at least in my section, had 3 seats to themselves, so that was fantastic. Got to get a lot of sitting done. Pretty much everyone slept for the first half of the flight. And obviously, before arriving in Massachusetts, I had to fill in a traveler's form as well, so I did that online before I came. But now I am in quarantine for 5 days, which is actually pretty pleasant. It's been a little bit weird. Obviously, not really being able to see anyone is sometimes a bit difficult. I don't mind having my own space, and it's a really nice apartment, and I'm really grateful that there's actually a place that I could stay in whilst I quarantine, which I'm so thankful for. And it's also nice because I'm near quite a busy street, so at least I can look out the window and there's always like cars or people walking past. I had food dropped off every day, so even though I haven't been able to actually see people, Shane's come and dropped off food, which is really, really nice. Brought me coffee every morning. We'll stand outside the window across the road and we will chat on the phone, also drink coffee, which is really sweet.
I was in quarantine for 5 days, and then I was able to get a COVID test. As soon as this came back negative, I was allowed out into the world again and able to explore Boston.
I don't know if you can hear the radiator buzzing in the background. It's really hot. I have to open the window to get the house to cool down, which is a little bit funny, but at least it's warm, so that's good.